Welcome to Chappell's Sports Museum and Restaurant here in North Kansas City, 323 Armour Road for Behind the Stats. We do a radio show here every Thursday night from 6 to 7. I am Matt Fulks. Ken Morrow here in the middle. Dave O'Hara down at the end. In case you're not a hockey fan or a fan of America, you, you might be wondering who Ken Morrow is, former Blades coach. But Ken was on the 1980 team, the Miracle on Ice hockey team for the United States, and then went on to win 4 Stanley Cups with the New York Islanders. And Ken, first off, I mean, you're asked constantly about 1980 and just that, and I'm assuming that just the euphoria around that and being a 23-year-old kid at the time, you never really get tired of talking about winning a gold medal for the United States. And what was the greatest? I'm biased here, but the greatest moment in the 20th century sports in America.
Well, you're not alone in that thinking because it's won so many awards as being the greatest sports moment ever, really. And we're as a team we're always amazed that people, first of all, that people remember it the way they have. It's been 28 years, and if anything, it seems to be growing in stature. It's an event that struck people in a certain way, and I kind of liken it to as a kid when I grew up. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, I remember where I was and who I was with when that happened, and when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, same thing. And for a sporting event to have struck people a certain way, the first reaction I get from people when they come up to me is they tell me what they were doing that day when we beat the Russians and who they were with and where they were at, and it just, as I said, it seems to be growing.
Well, we talked during this podcast or during the show, and you can hear it on a podcast at www.behindthestatsradio.com. Obviously, you're on kcondemand.com or kcmetrosports.com. But, Ken, we talked during the show, and we were talking even before this video, you and Matt and me, about what a fascinating study of human character, but also coaching that Herb Brooks, God rest his soul, passed away a couple of years ago in a tragic auto accident in his mid to late 60s, and all that he had to give. But you mentioned names like Micah Ruzioni, Jim Craig, Mark Johnson, yourself, and I hate even mentioning 4 names because there's 100 other ones I'd like to mention. But you had made a statement when I talked to you about the guys that you had played with on your team as teammates. But you said without Herb Brooks, Dave, we would not have won the 80 Olympic gold medal. Talk about your thoughts on Herb, but also why that statement.
Well, as you mentioned, certainly shocked to see him pass away a few years ago. Caught us all by surprise. Yeah. And you and I were talking earlier about that this guy should be a case study for coaches or guys that want to be coaches because, without him, certainly we would not have won a gold medal. I give Herb all the credit in the world. He molded this young group of guys, brought us into a system and had us play a system that was totally foreign to us at the time. Here, North American hockey was a dump and chase, dig it out of the corner kind of hockey at that time, 1980. And he wanted to beat all these European teams at their own game. So he took this young group of college kids, taught us a new system, a puck control, weaving type of system, and he wanted to beat them at their own game. And then every button the guy pushed, I mean, he was a master psychologist. Every button he pushed worked. And a lot of it could have backfired, but it didn't. I think he belongs up there with the Vince Lombardis and all those great coaches.
But I like the fact that you pointed out how he galvanized. He used himself as the adversary or the enemy, and it galvanized and brought you guys together as a team.
Yeah, a truly genius. And I didn't find out about this until just a few years ago. Here, all these years later, you're finding out that, why was Herb like that? He came out and said, he felt that he had to be the common enemy for the team in order, as you mentioned, to galvanize these players. A lot of us had played against each other in college, and we had enemies with each other as a group. A lot of these guys I had battled with in college and so on. Guys coming from Boston, guys coming from Michigan, guys coming from Minnesota, different areas of the country. And he had to bring everybody together. And the way he felt he could do that was to become the common enemy. And we all banded together against him.
So Craig Patrick, who actually played here for the Scouts back in the mid-'70s, the assistant coach on the 1980 team, he was kind of the go-to guy for you guys, wasn't he?
Well, he was. And, Craig, you can't say enough. I mean, he comes from a great hockey family, the Patrick family. And then he's had so much success on his own, won Stanley Cups as a general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He had a playing career in the NHL. but he really was the quiet force with our hockey team there. He really had to smooth things over. Usually the assistant coaches are the guys that are the go-betweens between the coach and the players, and that's what Craig was, and he had a lot of smoothing over to do to keep the players on board with what Herb was doing.
Well, we talked again during the broadcast, and again, www.behindthestatsradio.com. Ken, we talked about in reference to, at the time, got to stay correct here. At the time, you were the only player in the history of hockey to win a gold medal and a Stanley Cup in the same year. Now that's been changed by some Canadians. So we can say this: Ken is still the only American to win an Olympic gold medal and a Stanley Cup in the same year. And you talked about during the podcast or the broadcast, but I think it's important to repeat. I think it's you talk about intensity. And this time of year, you said to Matt and me, this time of year it kicks in. You can just smell spring in the air. But talk about that difference from going as a 23-year-old with a bunch of kids winning a gold medal, and weeks later you're playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. And we could have had the Stanley Cup this year in Kansas City. And I'm not bitter. I'm just pointing out the Penguins could be here playing the Red Wings at the new Sprint Center, but that didn't work out. But just talk about, because you're a scout now for the New York Islanders, so talk about winning the Stanley Cups and what you're up to today.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to have NHL hockey here in Kansas City. It's just a matter of when.
That's right.
It's a matter of when. And, we would look at it this way. We probably would have spoiled the fans early if we'd have gotten the Penguins here. Well, as you mentioned, I went right from, as a 23-year-old, winning the gold medal on February 24th to playing my first NHL game a week to the day later. And then 3 months to the day after we had won the gold medal, I'm hoisting the Stanley Cup above my head. So there was a lot going on in my life at that time, and certainly wouldn't change anything. We went to 5 straight finals with the Islanders in the early 80s and, came away with 4 Stanley Cups. Wouldn't change a thing with how my career got started. But as you mentioned, just a great time of year. The spring, as I was talking to you earlier, I mean, to me, it kicks back memories when I smell the flowers and you can roll down your window in the car. That's playoff time, and it's a grind. It's a grueling. People ask me what was harder to win, the gold medal, the Stanley Cup. I mean, the gold medal was a 2-week tournament. The Stanley Cup is a 2-month tournament, and you're playing every other day. And when you beat a team, you're playing a better team the next round, and it's a grind, and it's more a feeling of relief when you finally get there.
And obviously, you guys were a great dynasty in the NHL, and the way the NHL has changed over the last several years, and especially after the lockout a few years ago. Will we see many more dynasties, you think? Or, are you guys kind of a dinosaur now?
I just think the landscape has changed so much. I really doubt that you're going to see any kind of a dynasty. I think a dynasty nowadays will be maybe 2 in a row. And that'll be an accomplishment because it's just harder to keep teams together now. When I played, there wasn't really any free agency. You could draft a player, you could develop them, you could keep guys together right up through until they retired or got traded away. You just can't do that nowadays. You basically have a finite amount of time, 6-7 years, so you can have a player. When you factor in that, the first few years of that might be developing the player, trying to get this group of guys together at the same time. I mean, really and truly, the next dynasty might be this Pittsburgh Penguin team because they've got 3 great young centermen right now. Can they keep them together? Can they financially keep these guys together? That's going to be the big question.
And I guess we'll see next week if they will start this dynasty this year or not.
That's right.
Ken Morrow, we appreciate you coming by. Again, you can go to our website, behindthestatsradio.com. You can hear a podcast of the show. This is one, I am giddy as a schoolgirl or, happy as a hog in fresh dirt. And not just because of David Cook winning American Idol, but because we've been trying for months to get this guy. And hopefully we'll get a chance to get him back.
You're a true American Idol. Nothing against Kansas City's David Cook. But as Matt said last yes, I was just going to say, sing with a hockey stick. But as Matt and I had said last week, if you don't like America, then you don't like Ken Morrow. So let's just leave it at that, right?
Wow, that's
that's
a little too deep for me.
It sounds like a WWE kind of thing, doesn't it?
Well, we're hoping we get Ken back. But, again, you can go to our website. You can check out our blog, and we'll have more about Ken Morrow on that. And again, that's behindthestatsradio.com. We're here at Chappell Sports Museum and Restaurant, 323 Armour Road, every Thursday night from 6 to 7. We hope you can join us next week. Former Metro Sports baseball analyst Al Fitzmaurice, former Kansas City Royal, will be with us right here at Chappell. See you then.